unless you can clearly convince or draw the connection between this is my skill set and this is how it's going to apply or be used in your business or in this business to drive revenue or to create value, your application is not going to get a second thought.
Hello, welcome to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Each episode, we bring you a conversation with leaders across the healthcare industry, exploring topics ranging from new treatment techniques and interventions to novel service delivery methods and business models. And now your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab U Practice Solutions, a leader in patient engagement and retention strategy. Let's explore the possibilities of a new healthcare.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Better Outcomes Show. I'm your host, Rafi Salazar from Rehab U Practice Solutions. And if you run a healthcare company, technology company, software company, or even a healthcare organization, and you want to differentiate yourself from the competition, you want to set up a strategy that drives inbound leads, qualified inbound leads, into your business so you can close more sales and bring in some money, check out the Positioning Alignment Workshop, where we help you basically do that. We give you the bedrock foundation for a business development strategy that works. You can learn more about that at positioning.rehabupracticesolutions.com. That's positioning.rehabupracticesolutions.com, or you can just go to rehabupracticesolutions.com, and I'm sure there's a button somewhere that you can click and it'll take you there. So, alrighty. This week is, I believe, one of the last episodes that we will do on this series of non-clinical transition, or how to transition from a staff clinician into more advanced roles, whether they be leadership within a corporate entity or whether they be entrepreneurship, or business ownership, consulting, things like that. So I'm basically going to give you 5, I would call them key skills that you need to have as a clinician if you're wanting to step outside of the clinic and into more managerial roles, executive roles, entrepreneurship and business roles, you name it. And I'm going to what I'm going to do is I'm going to list them out and I'm going to kind of dive into each one. So the first skill is what we're going to call it. It might be even a character trait. The first skill is going to be intentional planning about your career. What I mean by this is, and I'll dive into it more, so basically not remaining pigeonholed in your clinical mindset. So that's number one, an intentional planning about your career. Number two, communication skills, whether they be interpersonal communication skills or cross-functional communication skills, data skills, understanding data and how to manipulate it or analyze it and use it for making decisions. You need to have leadership skills and people management skills. We call them stakeholder management sometimes it's people management. And then you need to have the ability, we call it high-level vision, or I call it high-level vision, but the idea to see the big picture or thinking big picture, so big picture mindset, if you would. So let's dive into each of those, and I will basically give you what I think about them, how you can develop them, and how that translates into getting out of the clinic and into a more managerial or administrative role, maybe in your healthcare company or organization, maybe as a health system or something like that, or starting your own business. So the first one, intentional planning. And this is really just a mindset for growth, maybe even as what we call it. One of the big things that holds clinicians back, I see this all the time when I'm browsing through social media, maybe I'm posting something for the business or something, and I'm in a lot of these groups that are like non-clinical work for clinicians or non-clinical transition or clinician transition, all these kind of things that are talking about pulling out of the clinic and becoming more of a quote-unquote business employee, a more white-collar employee. The problem that I see with a lot of the posts in there, a lot of the advice in there sometimes even, is that you get things, this is the essentially, I'm going to lay the sentiment out and then I'm going to tear it apart. So the sentiment is, our skills as clinicians translate into more than just treating in the clinic. We should be able to get paid for that, right? Like we should be able to get these jobs. The big problem and fallacy there is that while some of those skills might be applicable outside of the clinic and direct clinical care, unless you can connect the dots for a future employer, a prospective employer, you're just a clinician. And like, I don't want to say that disparagingly, you're just a clinician, but unless you can clearly convince or draw the connection between this is my skill set and this is how it's going to apply or be used in your business or in this business to drive revenue or to create value, your application is not going to get a second thought. And it's not because your skills don't translate, it's because you haven't done a good job of making that connection known. So that's step one, is being able to connect those dots for a potential employee or employer. The other piece is a lot of times clinicians get pigeonholed into viewing everything through the mindset of a clinician, through the viewpoint of a clinician, which means the continuing education that they pursue, the professional development opportunities that they pursue are all about growing in your clinical skills. And while that is great if your goal is to become a master clinician, it is not great if your goal is to get out of the clinic and do administration. Some of these other things, like communication skills, the growth mindset or the high-level vision skills, being able to lead people, those are all skills that are not clinical. They're not clinical. They're not solely for clinicians. You know, the CEO of Walmart, for example, has to manage people, has to communicate, has to have those high-level skills, has to understand data, and be able to use it to make decisions. So those are the two big things. Like, number one, just because you have the skills doesn't mean that those are clearly communicated to a potential employer. And number two, if you're only thinking in terms of your skill set or your discipline, you're not going to expand those ancillary areas that you need in order to get into some of those roles. So that's number one. So how do we get there? How do you as a clinician become the person that is an ideal candidate for some of these C-suite roles or management roles or administrative roles or quote-unquote non-clinical roles? The biggest piece of advice that I can give people, and that I do give people all the time when they come through the clinic or when they talk to me at conferences and stuff like that, is become somebody that is well read or learned outside of the specific discipline of your clinical expertise, and maybe even sometimes healthcare. So I'm going to give you an example here. I have read, and I try to read 2 books a month, and I've done this every year since 2016, 2015, so almost 10 years now. Maybe 3 or 4 of them have been healthcare related. In fact, they're probably up behind me. I've got AI Doctor, which is not really a healthcare book. It's more of a healthcare technology, but specifically for healthcare clinicians, it's Called to Care is one that I've read. What Patients Say and What Doctors Hear is another one. And maybe even The Body Keeps the Score. I'd throw that in there because I was using that a lot when I was doing some behavioral health work. Other than that, every single book that I've read has been in and around business management, technology, AI Doctor being one of them, communication, leadership, marketing. So I'm going to look over here now on this shelf, and I'm going to read you probably the top 10 books. Not the top 10, like not rated top 10, but the top 10 that I can see from here, because I've got 3 shelves here. So let's see here. The Business of Expertise, number 1, by David C. Baker. Selling the Invisible, and that's Harvey Beckwith. Switch, Made to Stick, both by Chip and Dan Heath, both great books. Essentialism, let's see here. Productivity is for Robots, Never Split the Difference, The End of Average, Predictably Irrational, Methods of Persuasion, all of these books. 80-20 Marketing. And I want to say there's probably Thinking in Bets, Influence, Cialdini, Connected, Managing Right for the First Time, Crucial Conversations, and that's about all I can see on that shelf without like really straining my neck. What do all of those books have in common? None of them are in healthcare. None of them are healthcare related books. They're all broad skill sets and sometimes even like philosophy of doing business. I know that there was one book I read a while back when I was like full time, like 100% management consulting when I was a management consultant, associate at a firm. And that was, I think it was called The Management Myth. So all of these books that I've read, none of them are specifically healthcare. In fact, all of them have those quote unquote, those soft skills that translate very broadly. I've done a lot of reading in the pricing creativity and win without pitching. How do you price, negotiate, sell, and close business? All of those skills are not specific to healthcare. And in fact, a lot of the examples in those books, none of them are healthcare related. They're all business related. What has that done? One, it's done a few things. The first thing it's done is it's widened my or broadened my experience and my viewpoint. So when I look at problems now, I don't look at it as a clinician. I'm looking at it kind of what are the high level order things here, like is this a operations issue? Is this a management issue? Is this a people issue? Maybe there's a clinical component there when I'm working with some healthcare organizations, healthcare systems, but kind of what are the broad kind of value drivers? The other thing that it's done is that it's given me insight into into what works in a lot of different industries, and then I'm able to take those insights and apply them specifically to healthcare organizations. I think David C. Baker writes about this in his book, The Business of Expertise. He talks about reading and learning very widely for the sole purpose of being able to take those insights from other industries and apply them to your own specific discipline, your own specific industry. So that's, from an intentional planning standpoint, that's what I tell people all the time. Like, what you want to do is become very well versed and well learned in management theory and communication theory and business skills that are outside of healthcare, so that you're able to apply them to drive value for the organization that you end up working with or for, as either an employee or an executive or a manager, something like that. So wide reading, wide learning is how you get that first check mark. The second piece was communication, building communication skills. Now, there's probably the biggest piece of that here is interpersonal communication, but this also applies to broad level communication, organizational communication. How do you structure an email, for example? Copywriting might even fall under this. How do you clearly communicate through the written word? I was just telling this to my son. He's 9. We're homeschooling him. And he was talking about writing and, I'm getting pretty good at writing. And I said, well, writing is one of the most valuable things one of the most valuable skills you can develop. And he said, he was asking me about it. Why do you think it's valuable? What is value? We're having those kind of conversations too. It's really fun. But I said, because no matter what in life, being able to command the written word is invaluable, because it's going to help you do a couple things. One, maybe it'll help you write advertising that's going to work, but really it's going to help you write communications that are going to get responses and drive action. So in this world of technology-driven business, emails and written communication play a major role. I think I probably communicate with prospects and clients maybe 80% of the time written, and then 20% of the time in person, before they become actual clients and we're on Zoom calls or on at their office or whatever. A lot of the preliminary and even throughout a project, communication happens online via email or text or something like that. Being able to use the written word to both influence, to frame problems, to be able to communicate potential solutions is invaluable as a quote-unquote non-clinical. I would even argue as a clinician if you're documenting for authorization or something like that. So written communication is huge. And then there's the interpersonal side of things. You are not going to get outside of the clinic and into management and into C-suite and into these business development or business-driven roles if you can't communicate effectively with people, right? So you want to begin developing those skills. There's a few different ways you can do it. There are courses on it. I know when I was going through a executive leadership series at the Department of Veterans Affairs, they put us through a interpersonal communications training, which was awesome. We covered things like The Crucial Conversation. There are books out there like Radical Candor is one that I really, really liked, by Kim Scott. She was an executive at YouTube. I believe she was in charge of like AdSense when they were rolling that out. But it's that book, Radical Candor, is all about how to be a good boss, how to communicate very clearly and succinctly without, I want to say it was like without losing your humanness or something like that. Like how to be a radically candid, so being able to bring up those conversations, those difficult conversations, without being a jerk about it, which I think is a huge piece. And then in my mind, like any kind of sales training that's worth its salt, any sales book or sales training that's actually ethical sales training, really focuses on that. I want to say it's spin selling or consultative selling or something like that. Like all of sales is really just a communication, a conversation. And the conversation is really, is there a fit between what I'm doing or what I'm offering and what you need? And if the answer is yes, let's take the next step. And if the answer is yes after that conversation, we'll take another step. And if the answer is yes after that conversation, maybe you're buying something from me, or maybe we're entering into a service agreement, or maybe you're hiring me for your position. But all negotiations and conversations like that are just that. They're conversations. So being able to manage those skills, being able to communicate clearly and effectively, being able to get your point across in a way that is kind, compassionate, and human, is very, very valuable. Even when it comes to being in management, you're going to have to fire people in management. You're going to have difficult conversations, disciplinary conversations with team members throughout your career. I remember the first time I had to do it at the VA. I remember being like up all night thinking about it. I needed, if we had a performance appraisal and it was not going to be a good one for this individual, right? Or like the first time I had to fire somebody, and it was a pretty clear case of like this person needed to be fired. And I'm not saying that you need to build you just need to get a callus over it so that you can just walk in and fire somebody. That's part of it. The other part is understanding like how to deliver that message in a way that is kind and compassionate, right? And that promotes or that denotes strong leadership. A lot of leadership skills is the ability to communicate. So there's that. So number one was being an intentional learner, or intentional planning around your career. Number two is communication. Number three is understanding data and how to use it and analyze it in order to make decisions, and being able to, again, communicate that to stakeholders. So if you understand the importance of data, again, it allows you to make decisions, and being able to communicate that to a potential client or potential boss or potential employer, or to other stakeholders that you're trying to get on board is very, very important outside of the clinic and in like C-suite stuff. So I remember the first time I got exposed to this, I was a clinician. I was doing, again, this leadership development program at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and we were going to roll out an initiative, and the initiative was called relationship-based care at the time. I won't go all into that, but it was something that in my mind seemed very abstract. We're going to work on, quote unquote, building relationships, interdisciplinary relationships, and that's going to carry on into clinical outcomes. Well, how do you measure that? So they sent us into the project management office of the VA, which at the time was like down a long hallway. There was no windows. And there was an office of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably 8 to 10 people, all on computers, and they all had spreadsheets, tons and tons of spreadsheets. And they were like using pivot tables and stuff. So we went in and they said, okay, well, what's your goal? And they kind of had this planning session with all of us as we were getting ready to roll out this initiative. And I said, well, the goal is to increase and improve the relationships between these 3 or 4 departments. And they said, well, how are you going to measure that? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, what are some of the outcomes that you're hoping? And we said, okay, well, we're hoping that it will improve the quality of care. Okay, well, what are some of those metrics that we're already tracking that we use to kind of benchmark quality of care? What would be some of the financial gains? Maybe it's length of stay, maybe it's readmissions, maybe whatever it is. And we had like 4 or 5 key outcomes. And sitting down with these people, these data, the project management folks really gave us one insight into how the data was going to be used to gauge our effectiveness, but then also how we could begin seeing whether or not we needed to make a pivot in the program or whether we were on the right track based off of the data. So, and then we would get emails every week like these are the numbers, this is where you're at, your scorecard, if you would. And then being able to take that and communicate that to leadership in the hospital and saying, okay, we initiated this was the number for this KPI before the program, and this is it after the program. So you can see, it improved or it didn't, it remained the same, whatever it was. So it's worth doing this in these areas or whatever. Being able to do that and communicate that, one, goes back to getting things done, and value creation, but it also helps you show and demonstrate real tangible effects and value that comes from the work that you're doing, which is, again, hugely important and necessary if you're going to be pursuing non-clinical work. I think as clinicians, oftentimes we think about this in terms of outcomes, and we're going to do an objective measure and we're going to document their progress towards their goals. It's the same thing in business, and data, and being able to analyze the data and look at the data and use it and communicate what the data is saying is how you get that. In the clinical world, it might be documentation. In the business world, it's big high-level data and key performance indicators or KPIs. Okay, so skill number 4 is the leadership piece of things, leadership and people management. You can also throw in like stakeholder management. There are 2 main areas of leadership skills that are really essential if you're going to hope to step out of the clinic and into higher level opportunities: administration, C-suite, executive, even consulting. And those 2 forms of leadership are like cross-functional is what I'll call them, and internal. So cross-functional leadership skills would be, maybe you are a department head and in a hospital system, and you're working on a project that involves 3 or 4 different departments, stakeholders from each of those departments. You're trying to achieve a goal, whatever it is. Maybe it's some kind of strategic initiative, maybe it's a project, whatever. Being able to lead, communicate, and manage that project across multiple departments, that's where the cross-functional piece comes in, is a hugely valuable skill. Or maybe you run an independent marketing firm and you get brought in by another organization, and this organization, the client organization, has maybe internal stakeholders. Maybe you're going to be working with their video development assets in-house, or they've hired 3 or 4 consultants and you're all working on a project together. The ability to communicate, to drive the project and keep it moving forward so that the client ultimately gets the outcome they want, again, hugely important and is a critical skill to develop if you want to do more than just become like a rehab manager, a departmental manager. In order to step into that higher level of responsibility and really impact on an organization, you need to be able to manage and lead across various stakeholders and departments either within that organization or a team of different stakeholders that are working on a project. So like I said, maybe you're working for a client and the client has hired 3 consultants and you're one of them. Being able to interface with all of them and drive, making sure, one, that your deliverables are being done, but that the ultimate goal is this end project being completed, is hugely valuable. How you can learn and develop this skill is to begin small. I always say anything that you're doing, especially if you work in a hospital system and you're given the opportunity to work on committees or projects, even if it's something that you think is very simple, like the administration of or the flow of like referrals and consults between two departments. Anything that you can do that gives you exposure to that is very, very positive. One, because you can demonstrate results on like an interview or an application. The other piece is that it gives you insight into those driving factors for various, like just politics and political, jockeying isn't what we're really going for, but understanding how that dynamic works, especially like a big healthcare system or healthcare hospital or health system, is important. The other thing that you can do is really brush up on some of those interpersonal communication skills, understanding driving factors. So in my mind, like, interpersonal communication skills is one of those bedrock skills upon which leadership gets built upon too. So you kind of can't skip steps here. Maybe you can build them sometimes in tandem, but being able to, one, actively listen, kind of empathetically understand where another person is coming from, and then understanding their point of view and the value drivers for that stakeholder will help you in the cross-functional piece that you're going to be doing, right? Driving to the finish line. The other area of leadership that you need to be able to develop as a clinician wanting to step out into management and into hopefully executive roles or higher level roles within an organization, or as a business owner, is going to be the day-to-day people management skills, right? Setting a vision is huge. Helping your team achieve the goals is huge. Part of that involves like actually having those crucial conversations, being able to have those disciplinary meetings, being able to manage the efforts of your team, right? And how you choose to do that. Data comes into play there. Maybe you've got a KPI meeting that you have once a month. Maybe you have specific benchmarks or goals for each team member on your team that you're going to be meeting with and working with to make sure that those are moving in the right direction. I remember one of the first strategic meetings I was involved in, internal strategic meetings that I was involved in at the management consulting firm. We were having a meeting about, we were wrapping up this one phase of the project and we were moving on to another phase, and we were talking about some of the challenges, some of the benchmarks that we needed to hit, some of the goals and deliverables that needed to be turned into the client organization. And Derek, the managing partner, said, okay, this is kind of where we're going. These are the outcomes we need. And then he said, what do you need in order to make this happen? Because my goal as the leader here is really just to make sure you have the tools and the resources you need to do the job, and then I'm going to back away and let you do it. And he said it almost in passing, but in my mind, it was kind of an eye-opening thing. Like, okay, as the leader, my goal is to really back off and to make sure, like, give you the direction, give the team the direction, give them the resources and the time, the money, the skills, maybe sometimes even the training that they need to do the job, and then make sure that they're free to do it. I think a lot of times what happens is a couple things. People either get promoted to their level of incompetency, and maybe we can talk about that in a minute, but oftentimes what happens is people that get promoted within organizations, especially corporate organizations, get promoted based off of technical proficiency. So if you're a good clinician, for example, you get promoted to be a clinical manager or a director of rehab, for example. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at people management. It means that you're good at your job, right? You're a good technical, in this case, a good clinician. So we're going to put you in charge of more clinicians. And oftentimes what happens to people in that role, when they get bumped into that management role, is they're just going to try to keep on being clinicians, and they don't realize that their role has shifted now. They're not hands-on patient care anymore, and they're not micromanaging, or they shouldn't be micromanaging the other clinicians on their team to make sure they're delivering care just right. Their role as managers now has shifted from direct hands-on patient care to giving the team the tools and the resources they need and making sure the benchmarks are being met, right? Whether that be quality of care benchmarks, whether that be outcome measures, whatever that is, financial, your goal is to equip the team and then to make sure that the numbers are moving in the right direction or the goals are being met. And oftentimes what happens is, as clinicians, because being clinicians is part of who we are, it's very hard to shift out of that mindset, and we just think that we get promoted into this management role and our job is to make sure everybody's delivering care the way we want it delivered, right? Or that they're doing it quote unquote right. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and as long as patients are happy, the outcomes are where you need to be, you're doing it financially sustainably, like that is what your goal is for your team. It happens a lot for clinicians that become business owners and practice owners, is that they forget or they lose sight of the fact that as the business owner, as the practice owner, their job isn't to be a treating clinician anymore. Their job is to be the business owner and do what needs to be done for the business. Maybe that's marketing, that's signing contracts, that's making things like payroll get done. And And oftentimes what happens is when the business is struggling, when there's a challenge in the business, the practice owner decides, okay, I just have to treat a whole lot more, and I'm going to be the driving force that drives the revenue for the business. And that's really a losing battle. It's a losing proposition, when really what your goal is as the practice owner in this case, if you're going to step into that role, is to build the team, to recruit a team, to empower the team, and then let them do their job. I run Proactive Rehab and Wellness, and I treat pretty infrequently at this point in time, just because we've got a good team that's treating a lot. And there are patients that come in and out that I never see, that I never know. And that's, in my mind, that's almost a requirement. If the team is going to scale, I can't see every person that's coming into the clinic. I can't know every person that's coming into the clinic. But oftentimes as practice owners, when we get into it and it's a small team, it's one clinic or something like that, we feel like we need to have our hand in all of the clinical care that's taking place. So what we do at the organization is I have a KPI sheet or a dashboard, if you would, and like once a week, the leadership team, the care coordination, the marketing, business development, and the patient access team member and myself, we meet and we say, okay, where are we at on these goals? Are we going to hit them for this month? Are we not going to hit them for this month? What changes or challenges need to be addressed in order to make sure that we're getting on track to be where we want to be in 6 months, in a year, or whatever? And that has become my role now, instead of being the guy in the clinic treating patients. And that took a little bit of a mindset shift, because I came, again, from management consulting. So I kind of came into this after buying the practice and having been a management consultant for several years, kind of understanding that intellectually, but it is something that is a challenge when you are a clinician to kind of totally back away. And, I can talk about this maybe more in a different episode. I kind of came into the organization that after I purchased it, knowing that I couldn't treat for a while because I wasn't credentialed. So it kind of forced me into that. And then I decided even after I was credentialed, like, I can totally tell that there are areas of the business that are suffering now because I'm stepping up my clinical work. So I stepped back again. We hired somebody to do that work. And I feel like the business is doing pretty well now. And part of that is because I'm not bogged down doing the day-to-day treatment or the day-to-day patient interactions. Not that I don't enjoy it. I love treating patients in the clinic. I just know that the business needs more of me than that, right? So, okay, leadership and people management, empowering your team. The last thing that you need, the last skill or attribute or characteristic that you would need in order to step out of the clinic and do really high-level impact stuff is being able to understand big picture, having a big picture mindset. I call it high-level vision. But the way I've heard it described is this. People that are, especially in healthcare, clinicians that are in the clinic every day treating, are very much focused on small picture stuff. They're worried about Mr. Smith in this case and their plan of care and their outcomes. And then they're worried about Mrs. Jones is coming in at 2:00 and their plan of care and their outcomes. High-level executives and even managers and administrators are charged with long-term value creation and big picture vision, whereas day-to-day employees and clinicians are worried about those short-term. In order to step into that role, you need to begin cultivating, even if you're in a position where you are a clinician treating patients every day, you need to begin thinking about the work that you're doing and what it is, the part that it plays or the role that it plays in achieving value creation long-term. Because in order to be able to manage those things, you need to understand them, right? And in order to get those jobs, sometimes get those roles, get that promotion, you need to be able to communicate to leadership that you understand, that you have that big, high-level vision, and that you are at least understand the impact that the work that you're doing has on those long-term goals, visions, desires, etc. How you can get that? How do you get that? A lot of it comes from understanding, like having those, if you have access to a leader, a C-suite, an administration or something like that is more than willing to have a conversation with you, like take them out for coffee or have a coffee with them if they'll give you 10, 15 minutes of your time, and just ask them about it. Like, how do you think about this problem? Or how do you think about, this initiative or the work that we're doing? How does that play into large picture stuff? And understanding how your little niche or your little corner of the organization fits into the big picture. And being able to, one, show leadership that you're interested in that will already put you on their radar for later. If you are looking at getting out of your organization and doing it, maybe you're wanting to start your own business, maybe you're wanting to become a freelancer or whatever, still taking the time to understand it if you have that resource is invaluable. But then also begin looking at everything that you're doing as asking yourself the question, why does this matter? Why does it really matter? Does it matter for, and I don't want to get in trouble here with clinicians, but does it matter that this specific patient has positive outcomes? Yes or no? And if it does, why? And it's not, sometimes you're looking at the business case here, not looking at the interpersonal case, which as clinicians is difficult sometimes. The business case why Mr. Smith needs to have positive outcomes is not because Mr. Smith's quality of life is going to be improved. Of course, that is a byproduct, and that is one of the goals. But it's to drive outcomes across the organization. Maybe there's financial metrics and impacts. Maybe there's marketing and communications and PR pieces associated with that, right? Like if Mr. Smith has positive outcomes, he refers his friend, his neighbor, he leaves us a good rating and review. Where there's obviously the financial benefit that we get from charging and billing for those services, all of those things. But you need to start thinking about what you're doing and how it plays into the grander scheme of the organization, and then think about how you can communicate that to other stakeholders. So those are my five skills or characteristics that you need in order to step out of the clinic and into higher level, higher impact roles. If you like that, if you think this episode is interesting or you found it valuable, let me know. I'd love to connect with me on LinkedIn, shoot me an email, info@rehabupracticesolutions.com. Let me know what you found valuable about it. If you think you want to share it, that would be great. I used to tell people, leave us a rating and review. We've got ratings and reviews on iTunes. That's cool. But I think what's more important to me is the impact. So share it with a friend or with a colleague that you think would find it valuable. And that's how you can help the show. If you run a healthcare organization, maybe a technology company, or even a healthcare clinic or organization, and you're looking at differentiating yourself from the competition and building a firm foundation for your business, your sales system, reach out to me. You can just go to positioning.rehabupracticesolutions.com or consulting.rehabupracticesolutions.com. Either one works. If you want to hire me to speak or come to your organization and do some training, you can learn more about that at speaking.rafisalazar.com. Until the next time, be safe, be healthy. I will talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the Better Outcomes Show, where we explore the possibilities of a new healthcare. Our hope is that you walk away from each episode informed, equipped, and empowered to push the boundaries in your own practice or business. We want to give you the tools to help you build strong, long-lasting relationships with your patients and clients, helping meet their goals, improve their health, and achieve better outcomes. Learn more at www.rehabupracticesolutions.com. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Better Outcomes Show with Rafi Salazar. This episode was brought to you by Strata PT. Strata PT is a single EMR platform and revenue cycle management service for physical, occupational, and speech therapy practices that helps you achieve a 99.99% reimbursement rate. If you'd like to learn more about Strata PT and see how their EMR and RCM works, head over to stratapt.com to book a demo.